And I want to ask this in the perspective of people that come and visit you. So your ranch is also where you do the retreats that we
Hmm.
mentioned in the introduction, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. What are some of the most common comments you get about people who are used to coming in, living in other places and they come in and see the ranch for the first time after they've been there for, maybe a day or two? What are some of the most consistent comments you get about what it's like to be there?
I think most people feel like it's grounded and very calming. But one of the really cool things is most people are so out of touch with where their food comes from. So as we tour the ranch, and most people have never pet a pig. Most people don't. It's really cool whenever I have my pigs and they're nursing and they just had babies, and to kind of see that whole cycle of life is really cool to get reconnected. And then, seeing your vegetables too, because I have a huge garden. And, people are like, I did not know that that's what asparagus looked like. I had no earthly idea that a grapefruit grew on a tree. I had no earthly idea that, about all of the things that we're used to getting into in a grocery store, because we've just been so disconnected from nature. And so reconnecting, understanding where your food comes from, how it grows, what nutrients it needs, looking at the circle of life with all of these animals and how they integrate together, and just reintegrating with nature is so healing to the body. And I think it's really important if we think about how we've set our lives up. We're constantly in fight or flight. We are constantly in stress. That's, kind of how our lives are, especially in America. And that's when we throw the body out of balance. The body is meant to be able to handle stressful situations for short periods of time, right? We knock the body out of stress, it goes into fight or flight to handle whatever danger is there, and then it's meant to go back into homeostasis or balance. But what happens is we keep knocking our bodies out of stress every single day, and it doesn't ever get a chance to go back into balance. And that's when we start to see disease, and that's when we start to see complete dysfunction and all the symptoms that we are struggling with. But when you're at the ranch and you get reconnected with nature and you get to walk around and you get to spend time with animals and with the plants and outside and indoors and looking at the trees, you start to get your body back into homeostasis. You get it out of fight or flight. You get it back into parasympathetic. And that's where the body can rest, digest, and heal. And so that's why I think it's extremely important that we all get reconnected to nature. We get reconnected to where our food comes from. It's really cool to see kids because they know and they understand. Like my whole family, they've helped us participate in the raising of the animals, the growing of the garden, the harvesting the chickens. Like they all kind of understand where food comes from and why it's really important to raise animal with kindness and also pay attention to what they're eating, because it also impacts us and our health.
So specifically about the kids, that's amazing. Can you imagine what our lives would be like if we were brought up in that way? But the kids specifically, what do you notice? How does that carry on through their life, like maybe with their school life or in sports or whatever, to have that level of connection, to have that level of nutritional quality every day? How do you see that carry on into their lives?
Yeah, my kids, I have two boys. My oldest is in college and he never got to really live on the ranch because he was off when we moved. My youngest, he just graduated last year. So his high school years, he was on the ranch, and he actually helps us run the ranch. And he is actually going to take over and help us continue and grow the retreats and the regenerative farm, which is awesome. And I can tell that he really understands how animal welfare, and it's really cool because we have different things that happen on the ranch. Like one time, one of our sheep, a baby lamb got stuck, and he had to figure out, and I was leaving. And so him and our ranch hand, they had to figure out what to do. And I talked him through it. Like, how are you going to problem solve? We have to take into consideration nature and emergency and medicine. And what are we going to do? And he's like, okay, I think this is out of our hands. The animal's not breathing well. We need to take it to the vet right now. I'm like, okay, this is really great problem solving. We're also taking into consideration the best thing for the animal. And, they are, and my kids have been raised in functional medicine, so they know that this is just kind of how their lives are. Now, my nieces and nephews are young. They've been coming around here since they were 3, 4, 5. Now they're 6 and 7. And they also help harvest the chickens. They know right where the chickens come from. If you ask them, you know, uh, how they should be eating, they're going to tell you that they need to be eating mostly animal protein, and it's really good for our muscles. And we look at the garden and how do we work with the vegetables to have the best health. And so I just think it's really important to have them in nature. And it's so great to see these little boys outside shoveling dirt and, playing outside and going to hunt for eggs, and they're not in front of the TV. And so they're really, I think it's bringing everyone back to nature and getting them out of the stressful environment.
So beautiful. I love that. One of the most common questions we get in the carnivore community is the quality of our food. Does it matter whether we're getting grass fed, grass finished, organic, free range, eggs and chickens and all the stuff that you mentioned? And I have been of the habit, and I would have to say I probably still am, like the conventional, if conventional meat is all you can afford from the grocery store, from the clearance section, if that's all you can do that and you will still be very, very, very healthy. And I think of things in terms of, okay, it's got this amount of protein, it's got this amount of fat, it's got these macronutrients and all these things. And we sometimes forget all the other things that you talked about, not only just in the quality of food, like you said, like some of these cows are diabetic and have all this marbling that we would look like if we had diabetes. Not only that, but all the other things that you mentioned, it's like being connected to the food source. And even if it's not you that's doing the ranching, knowing a rancher and having
Yeah.
those types of relationships and visiting a farm, there's so many other layers to what you're describing that, again, it's like if all you can do is afford grocery store meat, like do that, that's fine. But I think I also need to do a better job of explaining a lot of things that you were able to explain and why you make your food choices, because those are also incredibly important and special.
Yeah, I think it's like for me, I would not eat conventional chicken. Like because of how they're raised, because the quality of the nutrients of the actual meat and what they are shoving in these chickens, it is just, in my opinion, I there are other choices, right? Like if you can only afford, maybe I might eat regular beef, maybe. But maybe I would think about getting in a relationship with a local farmer. That's probably the best thing that you could do, is to make sure that you find a local farmer. And there's all kinds, there's little networks all around where farmers are happy to go direct to consumer, because if they can't go direct to consumer, then they have to sell to kind of like a distribution center, and then the distribution center sells to, like, let's say Whole Foods. And so they're not paying the farmer, they're paying them peanuts for their meat, and so it's really difficult. But if we could go direct to the farmer, you're going to get a way better meat, better quality of meat, and you can find a farmer that doesn't use glyphosate. You can find a farmer that does grass fed and grass finished. And so it's easier than I think what we think. But at the end of the day, if someone was going to choose like cereal over regular meat, I would also agree with you. It would be better to just eat the meat than to eat loads of cereal that's going to completely wreck their blood sugar and make them diabetic also. So the if you can't afford, all you could afford was conventional, I would eat conventional. But really, it's important for you to do everything you can, just not to say, oh, I can't afford it, but maybe you can find a way to afford it, or find a farmer that you can work with where you can buy it. I remember when I was first starting out, and I had a very hard time affording all organic. So what I did was I bought really good meat and then I just decreased the vegetables, or bought the vegetables that weren't on the dirty dozen list, right? So there's a dirty dozen list that's better for you to eat, even if it's been sprayed with pesticides and things like that, because it doesn't get into the skin as much. But I would say I've always tried as much as I possibly could to eat grass fed, grass finished, and organic or natural poultry.